Good afternoon. On behalf of Engineers Australia, I'm delighted to welcome you all to today's webinar, AI in Healthcare, the Engineer's Role. My name is Megan Purdy and I'll be your host for today. Firstly, in keeping with our custom, Engineers Australia acknowledges the traditional custodians of the country throughout Australia and recognises their continuing connection to land and community. We pay our respects to them and their cultures and to elders past and present. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge that today's webinar is being hosted with Engineers Australia's industry partner, Queensland University of Technology, or QUT. QUT's Faculty of Engineering is shaping the future by tackling global challenges like climate change, environmental sustainability, and population ageing through cutting-edge education and research. They offer students transformative real-world learning experiences and work closely with industry partners to drive innovation and create lasting impact. With a strong focus on sustainability, inclusion, and Indigenous engagement, they are preparing the next generation of engineers to lead with purpose and make a difference in their communities and beyond. Now today, we will hear from one speaker, followed by a panel discussion, and then we will move into our live audience Q&A. So I encourage you all to please send your questions through to our speakers via the chat box. Don't forget to include your name and who your question's directed to. I would now like to welcome our moderator for today, Professor Paige Little. Paige is a mechanical engineer and holds a PhD in biomedical engineering, which was awarded for her research in finite element modelling of intervertebral disc degeneration in the lumbar spine. She is the Principal Fellow in Spine at the Queensland University of Technology, Research Director for both the Biomechanics and Spine Research Group at CCHR and QUT's Seeley Centre for Biomechanics and Sleep Research. She leads projects in medical engineering, personalised medicine, connected care, applied machine learning in healthcare, and customised conservative care solutions. Her research partnerships in both the private and public sector ensure her work is applied and translational. Please join me in welcoming Professor Paige Little.
Thanks very much, Megan, for the introduction today. So the topic today was originally Mrs. Jones, the AI will see you now. It's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but if we listen to the popular media at the moment, one might almost believe this. I consider myself a pragmatic enthusiast for the uptake and deployment of AI into healthcare applications and settings. And while I know how to code and I have experience in developing automated digital systems for healthcare applications, I don't program or work directly with AI algorithms. I do, however, lead projects which utilise AI methods in healthcare, and I recognise the potential value of the technology for large data processing, pattern recognition, and automation of image-based activities. Most all engineers today will be faced with the potential or actual use of AI-based tools in their work, and only a small subset of us will be computer or software engineers with the formal training or motivation, for that matter, necessary to dive into these codes to see what's under the hood, so to speak. But it's increasingly essential that we know how to evaluate these AI systems and have the knowledge and learning to critically question and analyse their safety and validity for the application at hand. And when patient safety is the point in case, this is never more important. So in my academic role at QUT, I've recently developed a new Masters of Biomedical Systems and Technology, which is focused at engineers working in the healthcare industry. In developing the curriculum for the degree, industry feedback was really consistent in suggesting the course provide knowledge on AI. Not how to code it necessarily, but how to evaluate it. Today I'm going to speak about some of the issues which came to light when considering the engineer's role in an AI system deployment in healthcare. So over the next few slides, I'm going to try to cover some of the key aspects around AI in healthcare. Firstly, explaining what AI is, a brief history of where AI has come from and why it's such a flourishing field at the moment, some examples of its uptake in healthcare, brief I will acknowledge because there's so many, the regulatory guidelines around AI currently, and finally, the ethical implications in healthcare and the role of the engineer. First of all, what is AI? From the perspective of a medical engineer, the objective definition is artificial, as in made by humans, and intelligence, which is the ability to learn knowledge and make decisions. The more practical definition is the ability of a computer or a computer-controlled robot to perform tasks that are commonly associated with humans. And the context for these tasks refers to the ability to reason, to discover meaning, generalize, or learn from experience. There are often terms that we hear in the area of digital technologies and specifically artificial intelligence that are used interchangeably. AI, ML, NN, DL. But these terms describe different levels of abstraction in the overall technology called AI or artificial intelligence. And these are all essentially subsets of AI, where AI is the broadest concept referring to a system that performs tasks that would normally be performed with human intelligence and cognition. Examples of AI tasks include reasoning, learning, problem solving, perception, language understanding, basically anything that replaces human decision making. And the overall construct of AI is to give computers intelligence, a good example of which is self-driving cars or programs which play chess. Machine learning, or ML, is a subset of AI involving systems that learn from data instead of being explicitly programmed with rules to define outcome events. So it's based in statistical methods to make predictions based on the provided input data. ML is basically the method that is used to teach machines to learn patterns from data. A good example is image classification tools. Next, neural networks, or NN, a particular model type within machine learning. So they're a recent development in the last 15 years or so, and they're inspired by the human brain with basic processing units embedded in the code called neurons. So neural networks provide the architecture upon which to build the learning models. And then finally, deep learning, or DL. So these are a subset of machine learning that are large multi-layered neural networks to automatically detect features from raw data, such as pixels. So they're advanced large models, examples of which include large language models like ChatGPT or face recognition. Artificial intelligence as a term, concept, and research field isn't new. As I understand it, AI was originally coined by John McCarthy, who was a researcher from Dartmouth College in New Hampshire. Along with 3 other key researchers in computer science, he hosted the Dartmouth Summer Research Project on AI in 1956. This summer symposium drew together leading minds in computer science, where they posed the question of whether computers could be programmed to replace human thinking. On the right is a more recent picture of these founding fathers of AI, which was taken at a 50-year reunion of the group. At this symposium, one of the first examples of AI was showcased, which was called the logic theorist, and it was developed by Neil Sharon Simon to be a virtual mathematician. Over the following 60 or so years, AI development in tech was focused on making a computer designed for humans, making the computer reason. So it was founded in a very symbolic approach where people sat down to work out how they could undertake a task and then worked out the symbols that needed to be coded into the computer to make it perform this same task. So this required such knowledge to be hand-coded into the computer to replicate the human activity. Often these tasks were things a human could actually perform quite quickly. The success was defined through getting a computer to carry out the task that a human could do. An example of this is Deep Blue, which was developed in the 90s as an expert chess playing system, or ELIZA, which is a natural language emulator developed in the 60s, allowing a person to have a conversation, in inverted commas, conversation with a program. From 2011 onwards, though, there was a change in the focus for the AI algorithms from this former symbolic approach to a newer non-symbolic. Computer knowledge was no longer programmed, but it was learned from large data. And this period also represented a time when large data became available, so raw input from sensors was far easier to collect, collate, and classify, and computing power exponentially increased over this time as well. So the AI models were based on large data sets, and they drew on statistical methods with existing classifications to train the models. And this period also represented a change from the prior models that were heavily based in human experiences. A great example of AI algorithms at this time was the introduction of image recognition. Now, an exploration of AI in healthcare is, as you can imagine, very broad. So a research database search of ScienceDirect and PubMed, which are 2 well-known medical databases, shows how prolific this area of discovery has become. This key phrase, AI in healthcare, brings back more than 66,000 references in ScienceDirect and more than 31,000 references in PubMed. AI research in healthcare really started to appear in the mid-60s, as I mentioned, but it wasn't until the mid-90s there was a steady and then pretty much almost exponential increase. From 2010 onwards, the growth is very non-linear, with publications per year more than doubling over 2-year periods. So 2010 onwards was clearly a critical time for the field. As mentioned, this period also saw key technical advancements in parallel, which directly impacted the AI context. More data available, more computing power, larger, low-cost, high-capacity processors, and in fact, cloud storage started to come online. While the landscape is obviously very dynamic, currently and for some time now, AI in healthcare has been has been widely utilised in medical imaging and diagnostics. And the main reason for this is that AI excels with activities that require pattern recognition. Of these, radiology represents the lion's share of applications where automated algorithms are used for detection, workflow triage, and identification of tumours, fractures, and lung nodules. Radiology-related AI accounts for the majority of FDA-approved medical devices under the software as the medical device classification. Other applications in image-based diagnostics include ophthalmology, where it's used for diagnosis of diabetes, retinopathy, and macular degeneration. In pathology, classification of biopsy plates for cancer, and in dermatology for functions such as detection of skin lesions, particularly cancerous. The strength of AI to utilise large data processing algorithms means population health management and epidemiological modelling for predictive analytics in hospital administration and planning is valuable. Similarly, large data processing is also utilised for omics studies, precision medicine for chemotherapy, and pattern recognition in the context of discovering drug targets. Ambient clinical documentation, which uses natural language processing, is an application which has considerably expanded in recent years. AI clinical scribes automatically listen to the doctor-patient conversations, summarise the encounter, and generate structured clinical notes. So the technologies are surprisingly prevalent in everything from cardiology, neurosurgery, orthopedics, dietetics, dermatology, the list goes on. Pretty much anywhere that a complex consultation has to occur between patient and doctor. And they save a lot of time. But a key point of consideration here is that they should be used with transparency and the user should be cognizant of the risks. For example, fairly general statements like this one, which I received on a patient disclosure and consent form recently, really don't provide sufficient clarity on what the data is used for when stored in centralised data centres. Many of these clinical scribes train on the user's use of terminology and grammar, and by their nature, it's unlikely that the local processing on the care provider's laptop is powered to facilitate this training. Health organisations should, and as I've seen they do, utilise an enterprise approach for these scribes, whereby a site license ensures the data is ring-fenced within the organisation and not sent to external servers for processing. Despite the clearly florid field of discovery for AI in health, rarely do studies fully consider the context in which the technology must be implemented. A recent scoping review of AI implementation in healthcare highlighted some key challenges for adoption. Most AI systems don't possess autonomy. They support human decision-making. And there's really been a limited focus to date on implementation frameworks, which has a significant effect on the adoption success of AI systems in health. A more specific implementation framework for healthcare is needed to improve adoption success, to ensure transparency, technical literacy, ethics, ethical and privacy concerns are considered, and to improve technology trust. It's critical. You'll notice, though, that these challenges don't relate to the accuracy of the algorithms per se, but to the framework in which they are implemented in the healthcare context. The topic of AI-guided healthcare has to date been heavily dominated by the actual technology development, the networks architecture, the DL abstraction, and similarly, literature on this topic has been largely presenting evidence for the algorithm development and training to provide support for the technical and the computational aspects, accuracy, validity, verification. But this is only one side of the story here. Specifics of the AI implementation into the healthcare system have not been considered a priority, and the use of structured, validated frameworks to guide implementation is somewhat rare. More than this, in many instances, these AI tools are developed in isolation, so they're siloed within the clinical environment in which they will be used, and they're disconnected from the health ecosystem in which they need to operate and perform. So for this reason, the factors of trust, Transparency, technical literacy, ethics and privacy become even more essential components to achieve successful adoption. Translation of innovations into practice needs to be a stepped process because if it's not, we risk disruption to practice and ultimately mistrust and create barriers for its adoption. In a recent Australian Medical Association discussion paper, the AMA foreshadowed AI to optimise and accelerate healthcare delivery, enabling fast, accurate and reliable diagnoses and reducing cost of care, enhancing patient experience and minimising error in diagnosis. Now, in a healthcare system grappling with an ageing population placing increasing pressure on services, a surge in chronic disease, persistent workforce shortages, financial sustainability concerns, clinical burnout, and a stark geographic disparity in access and outcomes, this vision put forward by the AMA is an appealing one, and those challenges I mentioned aren't just Australia-based, that's globally. In contrast to this perspective, the AMA noted that evidence suggests public trust in AI is low. Design, development, deployment, and safe use are all of concern. They noted only 1/3 of Australians consider we have sufficient guardrails in place to address these issues. Further to this, Australian healthcare leaders recognise that health and wellbeing has the lowest AI adoption rate of all sectors in Australia. This was an outcome of a really nice publication from University of Technology, Sydney. Here you see results of a global review of trust in artificial intelligence, which was published in 2023. This was a review of trust across different industry sectors, and it spanned Asia, Europe, UK, North America, and Australia. And we find that Australia sits pretty midfield here, with around 1/3 of respondents willing to trust AI to some degree. That was to get a positive response here. It was somewhat trust was the minimum level, but only 1/4 of them are willing to accept it. It's not particularly resounding. So there's a balance we need to strike here between a need for healthcare leaders to ease burden on a sector that's under pressure, and a group of users, health providers and patients that is, who lack trust in a potentially transformative technology such as AI. The key is surely to ensure that these stakeholders start on the same page with a shared purpose so that the adoption framework for AI into practice is cognizant of the needs, capabilities and concerns of all users, and AI is deployed into a system where trust has already been established. AI improvements in healthcare delivery need to be stabilised by the gap we now have between development, dare I say, marketing, development marketing of AI systems and the real-life implementation of AI systems by health providers and hospitals. Really nice paper by Korfmat, published in 2025, actually recently identified 6 key issues in the context of the ethical and legal implications of AI development for health. The first of these is privacy. So AI systems need to collect, structure and use as much varied data as possible. But in the healthcare system, this data is linked to an individual person, and the type of data used must safeguard their identity. Here, regulatory safeguards are essential. Individual autonomy. This relates to the free and informed consent to obtain medical treatment, and it relates to a person's concept of self. The black box nature of AI systems may impair the autonomy of a person. Using ML algorithms, it's not always clear how a result was determined or how to challenge an outcome. So here, transparency and technical literacy become essential features for patients and providers to remain informed. Bias. Most AI systems are highly Western-centric in their training data, and this may impact results and potentially cause inequalities. While users may have no control on this, they should be aware of the data on which algorithms are trained so that the outcomes have context. Responsibility. All AI algorithms have an accuracy. It's never 100%. If anyone says that it is, then don't trust it. But unlike other computational or empirical methods, they don't easily provide a confidence limit on the predictions. So who's at fault when an algorithm is wrong? This is still, as far as I can see, a very new field. And while currently AI systems in health are typically not autonomous, they are highly opaque, and clarity for the healthcare provider regarding context and accuracy should be forthcoming from developers. To minimise the risk of using AI in health, AI systems should be evaluated before going to market. But more than this, monitored in place to ensure oversight. And then lastly, work and professions. AI systems are already part of the care delivery in many areas. They transform tasks, but they create new forms of work and readjustments of jobs. This is obviously a really hot topic and one that I don't plan to delve deeply into. But what I will say is that in my experience developing the new postgrad master's course in health technology, the engineer working in healthcare, this is actually an opportunity. It's an opportunity to upskill and to gain new knowledge on AI system safety, accuracy, and implementation, as the technical workforce in this context is seeking these skills. While unpacking concepts of ethics and trust in AI and the highlighted concerns relating to privacy and ethics, medical AI still faces a significant technical challenge to address issues of trust, data privacy, and security. And as part of this, safe and ethical storage of patient data is important. Concerns over data privacy and access must be addressed. To safeguard against these concerns, regulation and governance of AI are essential, along with frameworks for determining responsibilities and accountability, and infrastructure for safe data storage and sharing. The regulatory responses to AI are in development. They're new, but they're being developed. And as you can imagine, it's still the early stages globally. Some countries like Singapore favour voluntary approaches to promote responsible AI governance. Others like the EU and Canada are pursuing regulatory approaches with proposed new AI laws. The EU AI Act is an interesting, it's a very long read, but it's an interesting read. The US is consulting on how to ensure AI systems work as claimed, which is a somewhat vague statement, I have to be honest. I'm not super sure what that means. The UK has released principles for regulators to achieve system-wide coordination functions. G7 countries in May 2023 agreed to prioritise collaborations on AI governance, emphasising the importance of risk-based approaches to AI development and deployment. In Australia, there have been several interim reports, discussion papers, white papers on the topic of safe and responsible AI deployment in Australia. Specifically in the health context, the Therapeutic Goods Administration, or TGA, is the organisation responsible for the regulation of AI when it is used as a medical device. This is called software as a medical device, or SAMD. AI is considered a medical device when it is for diagnosis, prevention, monitoring, prediction, prognosis, treatment, and or alleviation of a disease. It's quite broad. And even software that uses generative AI, such as large language models or text generators, will also be regulated if it meets that definition of a medical device. AI developers need to meet all essential principles for TGA approval and product listing, including demonstrating sources and quality of inputs used to train and test the model. And in clinical studies, they're expected to show the relevance of the AI to an Australian population. This is really important because training data can bias the outputs if it's not sufficiently generalised for the target use cases. Synthetic data, though, is a really interesting point here. The data is frequently generated to augment or replace data for real patients when training and validating these AI models. This is standard process for computer systems engineers, computer scientists, software engineers working in this context. Called synthetic data. So for TGA listing, the developer must argue the reasoning for using synthetic data. And in many cases, synthetic data may be used but may not satisfy clinical evidence requirements. I have to say that the guidelines are still a little vague here, at least from my explorations, and this is an area which does need further development as more cases come to light, but I feel it's probably still quite early. There are some good sources of information on the topic if you feel like some light reading, through Department of Industry, Science and Resources and through the Australian Commission for Safety and Quality in Healthcare. Now, while regulatory approval brings accountability, beyond accuracy, regulators want to ensure that AI systems are robust, they're generalisable across clinical settings, and they protect patient privacy. When it comes to software as a medical device approval, regulators would typically approve essentially a static set of parameters for an algorithm. So this is the case for any software that's used as a medical device. It must meet essential principles, ensuring traceability, needs requirements analysis been performed in the context of risk management with a good QMS system active. But this static approach doesn't align easily with AI algorithms or account for updating AI models and data evolution due to changes in patient population and relearning or retraining of the models. So this implies a critical need for regulatory frameworks to be sufficiently agile to deal with and regulate adaptive AI systems which update over time. So very specific regulatory hurdles arise from this continual learning of these models. Over time, new data will be assimilated into the models, which may alter previously learned patterns in the network or even lead to new and unexpected outcome predictions. The FDA addresses this through a framework for adaptive AI systems with an initial approval and a process for updated approval over time. The Australian regulatory process is a little bit less clear on this at this stage. Surveys of healthcare leaders in Australia have highlighted the two biggest barriers to AI adoption in the context of health and wellbeing are trust, privacy and ethics, as we just talked about, and workforce education. The workforce barriers can be overcome through upskilling, training and support. Building an AI-enabled workforce by enhancing AI literacy in our graduates and investing in AI education for those already working in the sector allows organisations to confidently apply AI for impact. So now coming to the end of the structured part of my talk, what is the role of engineers in the context of health AI? For many of us, it's about bridging the gap. So as I mentioned earlier, this role is more than just the role of a computer systems or software engineer who are at the pointy end of the algorithm development. All engineers working in healthcare and health industry have a role to play here. It's firstly in using our skills in critical analysis to ensure AI systems deployed in our workplace are safe and fit for purpose. We don't need to know how to code them to appreciate whether they've been developed with efficacy, validity, and with a human-centered design and implementation framework overarching their use. We have a role to demystify, if you like, and support AI clinical translation, support clinicians and specialists to safely implement AI with efficacy and using verified AI systems. And part of this is to ensure that we have technical literacy, but also that we can support these teams to be active participants in this implementation by enhancing their own technical literacy. Basically telling them what they need to know and the questions that they themselves should be asking of the technology that they use. Lastly, we can assist with safe integration, using our inherent skills in system thinking, process design to smooth the pathway for integration into healthcare systems by verifying quality and reliability and interoperability of the AI system. That brings me to the end of my talk. I now will welcome my panel guests today to discuss the topic further from their varied perspectives and positions within industry.
Thank you, Paige, for your insight today. Well, I'll now invite Paige to lead our panel discussion.
Thanks very much, Megan. I'd like to introduce our panellists for today, who I've particularly invited as they all represent different perspectives to the implementation of AI in health. Please welcome firstly Graham McCauley. So Graham is a highly experienced clinical engineer with over 2 decades of expertise in biomedical engineering, health technology management, and medical device governance. So since December 2019, he has served as the Senior Consultant Biomedical Engineer at Queensland Health, where he provides strategic leadership in the planning and delivery of statewide biomedical engineering services. His career spans critical projects such as medical device integration in digital hospitals, medical equipment procurement, risk investigations, and the development of policies and standards for healthcare technology management. Graham is at the coalface, so to speak, of hospital and healthcare services integration of AI technologies into both clinical practice and into administrative activities. Next, please welcome our second panellist, Olivia Salvador. Olivia Salvador joined QUT in 2024 as Professor of AI to establish the AI for Health Research Network, a joint initiative between the Faculty of Engineering and the Faculty of Health. Olivia has published more than 200 peer-reviewed publications, which have attracted more than 15,000 citations. Olivia has been an investigator in close to $50 million worth of competitive funding, including CRCPs, MRFF, ARCs, and NHMRCs. He regularly contributes to organising international conferences. He was the General Co-Chair of the ISBI 2017 and the Program Co-Chair of ISBI 2023. and he's a regular reviewer for scientific journals, conferences and grants, including NHMRC and ARC, and is an associate editor for the Journal of Medical Imaging. More than this, Olivia is an AI system developer who has experience from both sides, teaching, research and development of AI, as well as implementation into practice. Next, please welcome our final panelist, Kirsten Fitzpatrick. Kirsten Fitzpatrick is a policy expert in the field of artificial intelligence in healthcare, with over 7 years of experience shaping ethical frameworks, standards of practice, and regulatory guidance. As Manager of Policy Development at the Royal Australian and New Zealand College of Radiologists, she's played a key role in developing policies and positions on AI medical device regulation, autonomous AI, generative AI, and its safe integration into clinical practice. So working closely with RANZCR's AI committee, Kirsten is dedicated to ensuring that AI is implemented in a way that prioritises both patient safety and clinical efficacy. Her expertise and commitment to responsible AI use continue to drive the future of AI in medical imaging, radiation oncology, and beyond. Radiology has been the poster child of AI implementation to healthcare practice for quite some years. So Kirsten's perspective on the panel today are invaluable to provide a specialty-specific lens for AI implementation. So welcome to you all, and thank you for being here. My very first question is actually to all three of you. I'll ask you in order. I'll start off with Kirsten. So the question is, how does AI in healthcare relate to your work and your everyday activities?
Thanks, Paige. AI in healthcare is really at the centre of what I do. So I watch how AI is being developed and applied across medicine and how it can be done safely. So even in areas like radiology and radiation oncology, which are generally, quite advanced in applying new technologies, AI brings new challenges around safety, accountability, and the transparency of it. So my focus is making sure that it happens with the right safeguards and guidance in place. And balance is really key in this area, because I think if we see over-regulation, we could really stifle any progress and leave Australia behind in, where the rest of the world is in their technologies and their medical treatment. But a lack of safeguards could have really bad outcomes for our population. So I think cancer screening programs are a really good example here. AI could reduce the pressure on, a really overstretched workforce, but because of the sheer scale of them, if it goes wrong, thousands could be affected. So I work with regulators and policymakers and doctors and like-minded people, just to make sure that we're getting the balance right here. And I think importantly, I always try and bring in the patient perspective. So, working within the healthcare industry, patient safety has to remain integral in what we do.
Thank you. Thank you. That was amazing. Thank you. Graham, same question for yourself. How does AI in healthcare relate to your work and your everyday activities?
Yeah, well, I loved Kirsten's last comment. Patient safety is paramount. And I suppose everything we do in my sector, so I work in Queensland Health as a clinical engineer as part of a group called Biomedical Technology Services. And we look after the medical device implementation and maintenance and support across the state in this for all healthcare. So AI is really, I suppose it's hit us for a little while, but it's really starting to grow. So it's becoming a big part of our lives, and in the future, I think it'll grow significantly. Two main areas that we look at is imaging analysis. You brought up before, Paige, about medical imaging diagnostic analysis. And without a doubt, our medical physics team, who have some engineers who work as part of that, are definitely starting to get right into how to implement AI applications into reading medical imaging diagnostic images to support the system. We also see a lot of movement in the real-time decision support tools for the surgeons that are using images as part of their surgical procedures. A bit of post-processing of large volume data for image capture, where you've got 6, 12, 24 hours worth of data from a patient, and how to actually get through that in a period of time so that you can actually condense that down for a surgeon or a specialist to look at. I think the other area that we're really starting to wanting to get into, and we're dabbling is probably the nicest way of putting it, is around big data analytics. For a very long time in Queensland Health, we've talked about we've got this massive data set. The issue is, what do we do with it? So we know a lot about the maintenance of medical devices across the state. We've got hundreds of thousands that we look after. Well, what do we do with this data? And data analytics around AI and machine learning is something we definitely want to move towards. Get to the predictive maintenance style. Much better to take a device down in a predictive way, in a proactive way, than for it to crash in the middle of in surgery or a diagnostic process. We're doing a lot of work with it across the state around supporting people with writing scripts within Python, for instance, and other applications. It's just from a speed perspective. We would love to get into the concept of augmented reality using AI to speed up the process for our technicians who are working on the devices in the field, to actually be able to overlay the issue that they've got and work with a digital assistant to actually solve these problems with servicing the device. So there's a lot of space to grow in this space. I think we are really only seeing just the starting point in our area, and we really do need to start jumping on the bandwagon and moving forward in that space.
Thank you. I think I've got about 5 more questions after you answering one question, but I won't ask those. I'm going to throw over to Olivia. How does AI in healthcare relate to your work and your everyday activity?
Sure. Thank you, Paige. So I'm teaching machine learning at QUT. So I live and breathe AI, and my research is also about how to apply AI methods and machine learning methods to medical problems. So as an example, 2 projects we are currently doing is one using computer vision, so a phone in aged care facility to take pictures and videos of people with pressure injury wounds, which is a big problem in those environments, and keep track over time. So we develop method to identify and characterize the wounds in 3 dimension and provide a dashboard to the clinicians and the nurses taking care of those people. Another example include the analysis of medical magnetic resonance imaging, so especially the brain. So that's where we've done a bit of work, where you get a 3D scan of your brain, and we try to measure the size and the shape of every bits of the brain to try to diagnose and predict neurodegeneration such as Alzheimer's disease. So this is where the kind of research that I'm involved with, and during that research, we try to collaborate with a startup and companies to translate those methods to the clinic. So we have several collaboration with small to large companies to often through grants, but also through advisory in the advisory capability or contracted research.
Thank you, Olivia. Again, I also have questions for you next, but still, I'm going to stick to my planned questions. I'm going to throw to Kirsten. So I have a more specific question for yourself now that we've set the scene around how everybody utilises AI and where your experiences are. So I'm curious on your thoughts of the challenges or threats that you see in the immediate future for adoption of AI-based technologies into healthcare practice. During my talk and my explorations, things like trust, but of course reliability, technical literacy, accuracy all sort of came up. But from your experience, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
So there's probably a few there. If we look at recent studies, Australia is showing a little bit of a mixed picture. So as you noted earlier, trust in AI is low, but interestingly, AI use is increasing. while optimism that the benefits outweigh the risks is really low, with only about 30% of people believing, it's going to bring more benefit than dangers. Most people seem to support regulation but don't believe what we've got in place currently is adequate or sufficient. I think if we look at a little bit of context here, Australia saw over 100 data breaches reported to the Office of the Information Commissioner in the last 6 months of 2024 alone. Collectively, I think we all remember the impact of Robodebt and how poorly that rolled out. So it really undermines public trust in these automated decision making, and I guess by association, AI. And I think a real issue we have here is even the best innovations won't be able to have any impact if there's no trust and the uptake of it is resisted. So I guess education and transparent governance are really key into building that trust and seeing, the integration and getting the benefits of AI. I think as well, there's concerns from clinicians. Like, we can see the regulations and legislations are evolving, but things like the legal liability for errors caused while using AI, it's still unclear. It hasn't been tested. There's still concerns, with the AI itself regarding accuracy and hallucinations, and how to, I guess, mitigate that. And clinicians need to learn to safeguard against that, as well as automation bias. So it's quite a new area. And I think, there's a little bit of trepidation. People will need to learn new skills and learn to work in new ways. So I think the barriers aren't just technical, they're social, they're legal. There's probably more that I haven't covered off there. And until we sort of build a clear understanding and accountability and really up that AI public literacy, I think we're going to see some, just issues in really adopting a lot of AI in healthcare.
Thank you. I completely agree. It's and the disparity between the public trust and the potential is it's frustrating, to say the least. And I particularly appreciate that you've also seen a similar thing around the legal liability. It reminds me of 10 or 15 years ago when robots were emerging in healthcare, and I remember having the same conversation. The robot stuffs up, whose fault is it? We're at a similar point now, where if the AI stuffs up, whose fault is it? It can't be the developers. It can't be they're not fully autonomous yet. So there's a level there, but at the same time, they're very opaque. So it's a really interesting space. And as far as I could see, we're just so early. It doesn't preclude us from utilising it. We just need to make sure the guardrails are there. Thank you. Yeah. Graham.
Paige, if I could just say something there. Sorry,
Please.
just to go from there. I think, it was one thing for the old robots, surgical robots, to sort of, to be a part of the process, and the implementation, it was relatively slow because of the expense. But you knew going into surgery that you were being operated on with a robot, as part of the process. One of the issues I see is that it's a little bit, there's not an obvious use of AI in healthcare at the moment. And we've had a couple of situations where you can see where AI has been a part of the process, but there's definitely no information provided to the patient to say, are you willing to be a part of this process where AI is being a part of your diagnosis process and treatment plan, and do you want to be a part of that? So that sort of discussion, I think, is going to probably have to happen at some stage. And because of that, it's very difficult to understand where AI has gone too far or has made the mistake. At the moment, it's more the clinical side that it may have missed something. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done there to get the public's trust in what's going on up. And also, we're also finding situations where it may not be obvious to even the clinician that there's an AI component to the device that they're utilising, that is giving them the information that they have.
That's such a good point, Graham, as well. Yeah, absolutely. And I was having this conversation with someone at the hospital actually the other day in terms of the AI that's embedded in some of the image analysis tools that are related to the medical physics. Now, realistically, this AI is actually helping us. You look at the kind of quality of images we have historically 10, 15 years ago and look at them now, it's great. But there is a question there about patient autonomy and their own consent. And even the clinician knowing whether they've got AI embedded in their tech, but also a level of approval from the patient as well. Like, where do we stop? But it's good AI as well. But I completely agree. There's a consent question and the speed with which these things are implemented is so fast and it's so insidious. It's not like a big obvious robot that someone was literally having in a theatre, right, where you can consent that. Great point. Great point. Olivia, a little bit of a change of tack. So I mentioned some of the challenges that our healthcare system, not just in Australia, globally, is facing, of course. And I guess the question is AI the solution to system capacity, to challenges and workforce shortages in hospitals and healthcare services that we suggest it will be? Said another way, how close are we to really seeing improvement in healthcare system efficiency with the implementation of AI? And in what field is it most likely to have an impact?
Yeah, that's a big question. Could spend the afternoon on just that question. So I think what's important to recognize is that AI has been around for decades, and it's pervasive to many systems. When you get an MRI, there are tens or perhaps hundreds of small AI systems which are working together to improve the quality of the image, to accelerate the scan, and to help the radiologist to make the decision, even if it's not the high visible step that we think when the AI is going to replace the radiologist. There are lots of systems everywhere. Surgical robots, radiotherapy. I think Paige, you mentioned ophthalmology. So there are lots of equipments that integrates some kind of machine learning pieces into their process. And healthcare is improving because of that. So yes, it's I think improving the efficiency. I think also it's important to recognize that there are different kind of areas where AI is making a change. So I like to think of the first bucket of system, which is how to improve the productivity and efficiency of the healthcare system itself. So how to run hospitals, operations, shuffling data around between pharmacy and hospitals and GP, and all these system improvements. There are lots of companies offering commercial solutions that include AI for that, and that hopefully is going to improve the productivity of running healthcare as a system. The second one is the patient care itself. So we can do better diagnosis, better prognosis. So detecting disease, predicting the evolution of a disease, or monitoring treatments. So there is lots of methods that have been used for a long time, and new ones that are coming up, mostly based on the AI system. But there is also a less visible part, which is medical science. So a lot of research on medical science is increasingly using AI tools to analyze data, to come up with new insights. So, for example, all the areas that are using microscopy imaging. So microscopy is full of AI systems that analyze images, count cells, tell which bit goes to where, and the progress in medical science are improving a lot because of those AI tools. The thing I wanted to add also is that perhaps there is, I think there is a bit of a fallacy about that AI or anything is going to decrease the cost of healthcare. I think the cost of healthcare will never decrease. So if something gets cheaper, it's very unlikely that the budget is going to be reduced. People are going to use that room in the budget to do more stuff, or to buy more equipment, or to solve something else. I think we'll never be done with healthcare. There won't be a time where we would say, okay, we have solved healthcare, now we can use our own money to do something else. I cannot see that happening in the foreseeable future. But I think the big change that's happening, it's not actually specific to AI. It's a shift from on-site computing and on-site processing to software as a service. And the reason is those AI systems are so big and require so much computer, and there is a trend in the software industry to move everything in the cloud and to process everything on the off-site computer, that this is a big source of issues, because you have to send data somewhere. You don't control the software. It could be updated without you knowing, and I think this is a big shift that's happening everywhere, and that's problematic for the medical industries. So it's a slow process. It's a complex system. But AI is used more and more, and it's really pervasive everywhere. And I think it's healthcare is improving, notwithstanding all the issues that were just mentioned that are really true.
Thank you, Olivier. That's a really interesting point that you make, that AI will not necessarily decrease the cost of care. It's a really good point, because it brings with it parallel expenses, doesn't it? And it, as you were saying that, and I think you're alluding to it, it strikes me that and Graham's alluded to this as well, that there's a huge amount of data, but having an infrastructure in such as cloud storage, for example, safe, secure cloud storage in itself costs money, but that's kind of a mechanism by which AI can be utilized to answer some of these large epidemiological questions. So it brings parallel expenses in that space. Would you agree?
Yeah, Paige, actually, to your point, so the software, the TGA and FDA approval process, so historically is based on the fact that you create a widget which might include the software inside, and then you put it on the table and you say, this is the version I want to sell, and you get approval to sell that version, and it's frozen, and then you build that box, or you build that widget, and then you sell it. We know how to do that. All the regulatory framework are really well suited for that kind of situation, but no, it's a very different process where you have to send the data to a server somewhere, which does some stuff and then give you back the answer, and that is not very well suited to the current regulatory process to certify that the technology is safe and useful. So I think there is a bit of a friction here because of the change in that respect.
Yes, that gives me some relief, because I really couldn't find how TGA was really regulating that adaptive nature of AI, because it's not the typical way software is regulated. So it sounds like, as you're saying, it's a moving space. They're still trying to establish those guardrails. Yeah. Kirsten, another one for you. So what are your thoughts on the pace at which AI and machine learning technologies are being developed and implemented in clinical practice, compared to the pace at which government departments and agencies are developing guardrails to ensure these technologies are adopted safely and with efficacy? And this is particularly a question I think super relevant for you as a policy advisor for a professional clinical body.
Thanks, Paige. Look, simply put, regulations aren't keeping pace with the technology. And I think we've seen this in all other areas as well. Technology evolves really quickly, and its consequences, or the impact it has, can take some time to surface. And by that point, the system might be really widely adopted. I think Graham noted that there's a lot of AI implemented already. And I think within sort of radiology and the medical imaging space, we're almost at the point where some medical imaging processes can't be performed without AI. And I think when we're considering AI, we need to look at the spectrum of it. So we've got some applications that are just, making the images clearer and better, and potentially really low risk in both the clinical and the privacy context. but others that would require, a lot more careful consideration and regulation. And when we're looking at changing the regulations here, I think the policymakers need to see evidence before acting. These processes can be quite slow moving, and AI challenges existing frameworks. It's not static. We can see instances where it can learn on its own, and it needs sort of a different way of looking at it and way of considering it when you're regulating it. So, look, there have been situations like this before. I know telehealth, people struggled to work out what to do with that and what requirements to put around it. So we did see the regulation lagging behind the practice there. And I think even beyond healthcare, if you have a look at the eSafety Commissioner right now is really working on managing the risks of social media decades after its emergence. So, it can take time to see the impact on society and what the right actions are to mitigate any risks. We are seeing, some promising movement though from the government. So the last year's consultation put out by the Department of Industry, Science and Resources resulted in those 10 voluntary guardrails, which are in place right now. And that's to guide, the use and implementation of AI in high-risk areas, which obviously medicine is one. And the department also recently put out some AI adoption guidance showing that they've got, an appetite to guide people in how to do this right and mitigate the risks. Within medicine, specifically, we're seeing a lot more guidance emerge now. So the Australian Commission on Safety, Quality and Healthcare has been active in developing some guidance around that patient consent, around implementation. I also note that the TGA recently strengthened some of their requirements on AI software medical devices, and that's really about the transparency. So making it a requirement that they need to show the end user, the scope of their device, the training and testing sets. So clinicians actually have the information on hand to determine the suitability of devices. So I think, that's a really good move in the right direction. We're seeing conversations happening. People recognise how important it is to get right. More work is obviously needed. And I think, as the technology evolves, so must the way the government thinks about it. It really just is, in a lot of ways, early days. And I think everyone just needs to think about the right path forward from here.
Thank you. That was actually a really positive answer. Yeah, it's a really good point. And I like the parallel that you make actually with the government policy now trying to catch up with social media, having known that something like that has existed for a really long time. So, it's difficult to keep pace with these very fast, very accessible technologies that are being utilised very quickly and very readily and marketed very well, I might add, to a lot of clinicians, at least some that I work with. It's a very convincing story until you ask more questions about where is the data going, where is it being stored. It's all staying on my computer. No, it can't all be staying on your computer. So having the conversation, having that transparency, and it's a really good point. Thank you. My last question is actually for both Graham and Olivia. So I'll start with you, Graham. I guess my question is, what do you see the engineer's role in AI implementation, trust building in the context of health regulations and system trust? You're at the coalface.
Yeah, look, it's a hard question to answer in some ways, but first and foremost, it's the patient safety advocate, and I think we've always got to remember to bring it back to the patient, and so I suppose that's a starting point. But I think that there's opportunities everywhere for us to really improve on the implementation of AI. And I'll just sort of change the story a little bit at the moment. Just the last 10, 15 years, we've always talked about healthcare being, well, actually over the last 20 years, really, healthcare being about 10 to 15 years behind the technology freight train as it flies through. And the healthcare system is a little bit different. It used to take a long time for a device to go through R&D and become a thing. And by the time it actually gets to market, it probably started 10 to 15 years ago in the ideas, the engineering teams in the factories. But it also comes with about 10 to 15-year-old technology. And over the last 20 years, companies have definitely improved that speed at which they can get new technology out. So rather than us still working with operating systems and device concepts that are 15, 20 years old, they are, maybe it's down to 5 to 10 years. But the problem, I think, is that the AI is moving so much faster than we've ever seen anything like this move before. So we really just need to make sure that we remain as that critical interface between the technology and the healthcare system to really support the understanding on both sides. And I think this is one of the things. We've really seen a massive influx of technologists, engineers, software designers coming into the healthcare industry going, hey, look, we do all this fantastic work over in the non-healthcare space. We can do all this in the healthcare space, but not actually understanding context around healthcare and healthcare is a little bit different than the general public and just general industry overall. So I think it's our job to absolutely start to put time and effort into understanding the risks of AI. It's very easy to sort of sit down in a corridor and have a conversation with someone and talk about it. But when you start to document it and really start trying to work out, well, how can we then start looking at ways of possibly designing out some of the risks, or at least drawing attention to it and getting that to the right people in healthcare and also industry who are designing these to try to come up with a solution that we can move forward on. So I think that's probably the first thing. But to do that, one of the first things we actually do, we need to be able to become AI literate and be able to use the talk. We have these sales people come through, like you were just talking about, and sell these fantastic systems that are going to solve the world and we're going to save millions of patients. Well, do they even understand what they're saying, or are they just reading a script? And in a lot of the cases, they are just reading a script. And we need to be able to talk with the right people to ask the right questions and make sure our clinicians understand that and to know what questions to ask, but not just reading from a script, but actually understand the consequences and what they actually mean. So I think literacy in AI, everyone just needs to really put some time and effort into that to build up their understanding, so they can then have a proper conversation with both sides and build trust. If you're coming from a perspective of having no concept of what's going on, it's very easy to lose trust with either side. So I think first and foremost, literacy. But then another thing I think is we really need to start as an industry, start working from an end user perspective, start coming up with validation and QA processes where we can take what the companies have done. Now, most companies are absolutely legit and they're doing their best. And these days they are really providing us with fairly detailed understandings of how their algorithms work and where their training data comes from. So it's a little bit easier these days with some of the good companies, but there's a lot of companies that aren't. So I think everyone coming along to make sure that we have some proper validation processes and QA processes where we can demonstrate not just at day one through a purchasing process and the actual implementation on the site, but every time a new software update comes through, how can we validate that? And what are the QA processes to make sure that it is still functioning as it should be? And if I think we get to a point where everyone's understanding and then can be running these processes and they're passing, that the trust levels across the industry will improve on both sides of the fence.
All of that was music to my ears, Graham. I completely agree. The literacy piece.
I don't know how to do it.
I'm just 100% on board. Yeah, the literacy piece. If we're literate, we can help our partners in healthcare to similarly build literacy, and with that, we can build trust in the system, and with that, we can build trust for the users. It's all part of it, and I completely agree. It's something engineers we can do. We don't need to be able to code it, but we can understand the process that's needed to, in an efficacious way, implement a good design safely. That's a quality design. So yeah, I love that part. Yeah. And then
translate the document. And with that though, it's In fact, from a clinical engineering perspective, we've always seen ourselves as the translator between clinical and the engineering environment. And this is exactly the same situation. There will be times where it'll be very technical on the AI side. We need to be able to take that, translate it, distill it down to something that makes sense for the clinical side, and vice versa. And I think if we can't lose that very important function that we actually provide in the industry.
Yep, 100% agree. Yeah. Olivia, I'm going to ask you the same question. What is the engineer's role in AI implementation and trust building in the context of health regulations and system trust?
Yeah, so I think Graham really covered all aspects to that. So perhaps I would paraphrase what is just said by. I think the role is very important to carry the best practices of the field really, and so that's what we teach at QUT, and I'm sure in all the Australian universities and many international universities. Understanding how it works, understanding the best practice in terms of validation, what criteria to use, where are the risks, what can be done, what cannot be done, all the privacy issues, understanding the regulation. So this is really the best practice layer of any well-rounded engineers who needs to work in that environment. And I think it's no different than any other field, and this is very, very important to guarantee that those AI systems are implemented the right way and fulfilling the purpose for which they are being deployed.
Yeah, thank you. So that brings me to the end of the sort of formal panel part of questions that I had prepared today. Really enjoyed all of your answers actually, and so informative. I'm so pleased that I brought you all together into one room to talk about this particular context of AI in healthcare. I'll now hand back over to Megan to facilitate the next phase of today's webinar.
Thanks so much, Paige. Well, now it's our audience's turn to get involved, so please submit your questions in the chat box and let us know who your question is directed to. Also, if you could pop in your name, that's always nice so we can actually acknowledge who has posed the question. A big thank you to everyone who submitted questions while registering for today's webinar. What I might do is kick off with some of those. So I'll just kind of start with question number one. Graham, we had a question slightly different focus on the topic, and this one came through from Christopher McCarthy, who's from Victoria. His question was, what building services opportunities have you seen or have thought about for AI in healthcare? So slightly different focus.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, I mean, my expertise is definitely not within the built environment side of health infrastructure. But I suppose one of the big things that there is a lot of integration between the physical building and what the building can do, and the medical devices and systems that are becoming so integrated within the actual infrastructure itself. There's definitely, from a worldwide perspective, a real push towards this concept of smart infrastructure. Now, that can mean a lot of different things, but smart lighting, smart HVAC systems, and looking at energy consumption, and the unbelievable increase in Internet of Things sensors that are real-time monitoring the different, I suppose, the veins and arteries of a hospital that are in there that keep the hospital running. The electrical systems and predictive analysis, and using machine learning and all the sensors just for fault detection, just to try to catch a fault before it actually shuts down a whole hospital, which obviously isn't a great idea. I've doing some research for some case studies and alike, not just for this presentation, but just the work that we're doing. Looking at ventilation and AI optimization flow analysis of how to keep the hospital at the right climate zone across the hospital through busy periods of high outpatient clinic usage versus overnight, or where there's not actually that massive influx of just day patients. Overall facility management. So there's, for a long time, the whole concept of having a digital twin has been a big deal. And I know that there are quite a few companies using AI agents to bring digital twins together with all the Internet of Things sensors that we've got across a hospital to really try to come together with a single package that can detect when things are going to go wrong and be predictive and not so reactive in its maintenance. It's much better to plan a shutdown across a hospital where you can increase your staffing levels for nursing to look after the patients in a known period of time versus having an unexpected downtime. I saw a case study that Johns Hopkins in the US did where they've introduced an AI-powered analysis tool for predictive maintenance around power consumption. And what they're saying is that they've seen a 20% drop in energy consumption across the facility, which is quite significant. Energy for a hospital is quite a high budget line. And about 15% decrease in unplanned failures. So any hospital would love to know that they're not going to have a planned failure when it comes to power systems. So, yeah, I think that's probably the area that the built environment can definitely move in when it comes to hospitals.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Graham. There's definitely some opportunities there, that is for sure. Well, Paige, kind of continuing on with that, I suppose, overarching skills type question, where do you see, or what key technical skills or competencies will engineers need to stay relevant as AI becomes more integrated into healthcare systems? And that question came through from Habib.
Look, I think probably, first of all, as I mentioned in my talk, engineers won't necessarily need to have the underlying knowledge base or skills, which is one of the fundamental, I think, competency one listings for engineers. But their skills in engineering application are really important. So an ability to investigate and understand complexities in technology, the inherent systems thinking that I think we as all engineers tend to possess, and that's one of the competencies. Critical review and analysis skills, how to assess risk, and Graham alluded to this as well, and how to consider the balanced impact of technology in the healthcare system, and certainly, which Kirsten has already been alluding to, our ability to ensure compliance with regulations, to appreciate the regulations which are appropriate and apply, and then put systems in place to ensure compliance. So those are fundamental competencies which relate to our sort of engineering application. And then also I think the soft skills, whilst engineers aren't always known for our soft skills, I think some of the soft skills that are associated with our professional competencies are really important. One of those is ethical practice, and we've all alluded to that. I certainly did in my talk. And understanding the ethical implication of the particular situation in hand. And in a healthcare setting, that's very relevant because we're talking about patients' own autonomy, as well as patients' own security, and then patients' data security. There's many aspects here around that ethical practice. And then, of course, abilities for clear and respectful communication. And that's needed to ensure technical literacy of the stakeholders. And I think really importantly, those communication skills, so assimilating all the information about the technology and communicating that to stakeholders, whether that be clinical specialists or whether that be otherwise, that comes to the transparency that's essential for implementation success, which has been a little bit underdeveloped so far in the context of AI.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Paige. Olivia, I've got a question which came through from Thomas Kingsford. It's quite a big question, so I will paraphrase somewhat. And his question is around, despite innovation and reasoning, modern deep learning algorithms have no architectural or training mechanism to be able to reason in general. Medicine is one of the most challenging fields for humans to reason about, due in part to the focus on partially observable, non-stationary, chaotic systems, humans that is, coupled with regulation ethics. How can we produce efficacious and safe applications of modern deep learning to medicine, given these apparently insurmountable obstacles? If I can get my words out, that is.
Well, that's a very well-informed question. Everything in that question is right. I would summarize it by saying that the current AI system are big correlation machine. They don't use logic or the way we or doctors use logic to infer some missing data or to make some judgment call on given very scarce data. So that being said, AI are still very useful as a correlation engine, and the reason is, if we think about a normal day in our life, work life, or any healthcare professional, there is, if we think about the percentage of things that we do that is completely novel or that requires logic, it's a very small fraction of the thing we do. Most of what we say or do during a day has already been done or said before. And that's the strength of AI. Those big systems, they have so much data, and the computer is so big that pretty much if everything has been done or said before, then the systems are capable to regurgitating it as on demand. So it's still very useful, but like the question said, there is still this lack of guaranteed outputs that is often necessary in many medical applications. And I think one of the best answer we have to that problem is the regulation, the TGA approval, and FDA, CMAC, and all those regulations. They have been built to make sure that when we use the technology, it's safe and useful. So this needs to be demonstrated, and the burden is on the vendor to show that what they said is safe and useful, and that is how we have trust in the system, because we know the risk and we trust that this whole regulatory process is working well. So yeah, it's fantastic tools that can help a lot. There is still this thing that we still don't know how to do, which is the reasoning part of it. But hopefully, despite all the issues we talk about ethics and TGA being slow and all that, it's still a good system to make sure that the risks are mitigated to a large extent.
Awesome. Thanks, Olivia. I've got a question which has come through from Lily Perrins. Now, Lily is also watching live, so she has posed that question at registration or live. So hi, Lily. The question was, is there any initiative being developed or currently in place that tries to offset the environmental impact of using AI in healthcare? So maybe, I think Kirsten or Paige, whoever wants to have a go at this one.
Sure, I can have a go at that one.
Hey, Kirsten.
So, I think AI's environmental footprint is a known and growing issue. We've got just the use, the water use, the energy use of the data centres. I think these will continue to grow as models get larger and more complex, and also as AI, just the uptake continues to grow as well. There is some movement towards green AI. There's a Green AI Software Foundation with representatives from some of the quite major tech companies. They do have an AI committee which is focusing on what can be done to reduce the environmental impact of AI. I'm not sure what their uptake is generally and also in healthcare specifically, I think probably one of the most important questions that needs to be asked, and it does have huge environmental impacts, is do we actually need to use AI to solve this problem, or is there a simpler solution? And I think, especially in these early days, we're seeing a lot of AI for the sake of AI. We're doing it because we can, and it's not always, imperative that we're doing that. I think a big struggle as these fields emerge is there's not the shared understanding or even the common definitions yet. So progress can seem slow because a lot of the groundwork really needs to be laid first to make sure everyone's actually on the same page when we're discussing certain concepts. And I think another barrier to sustainability is, and it's not medically specific, it's everywhere, there's a cost involved. And I think, we've seen everywhere, a lot of people, maybe even most people, think sustainability is important, but then what are they actually doing to promote sustainability in their practice or in their daily life? So the concept is out there, people are thinking about it, and I'm hopeful that as awareness grows, we'll see stronger alignment between innovation and our responsibility for the planet.
Thanks, Kirsten. Paige, I didn't know if you want to add to that one, or Olivia.
Hello, Olivia. I don't have anything to add. It was a pretty good answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a quick, so two quick points about this environment issue. So so most of the big energy consumption on the big computers are not very specific to medical applications. They are mostly used to train language model and images of cats and dogs. So this is not, so the medical application are benefiting from those advances, but it's not driven by medical application to a very large extent. And the other comment is that unless there is a new big technology progress that comes up, it seems that the large language model and large imaging model, generative AI, is starting to plateau in terms of performance. And when that happens, I don't think it's going to take a long time before those models are miniaturized and even put into a chip. So at one point, there will be very little incentive to train a new language model for another 6 months to have a very tiny incremental performance gap. And when that happens, then we would have chips that include the model on a mobile phone or everywhere, or you would have a computer with a language model on the circuit board. And when that happens, then the cost of at least serving those models is going to decrease a lot. That is until there is the next revolution and we have a new technology that requires training on inference again. But that's another story. We don't know to do that yet.
Thanks, Olivia. Paige, I've got a question that came through live, and it was around, how do you think AI can be applied to the pharmacy industry, also with regards to AI use in at-home healthcare?
I haven't seen a huge amount of applications in the pharmacy industry. So what comes to mind is the use of it because of the capabilities of large data processing to identify drug targets. So I definitely saw that for medications that came up. The other thing was remote biomarker monitoring. I have seen this as well. So in the home, for example, utilizing biosignals from wearable devices, and then can use those physiological measures to give information or to guide aspects around medications. I think the reality of that being rolled out is very early. I don't know that I've seen that used a lot in practice, but I've certainly seen research papers around that. I think that's probably a lot of responsibility put on the AI in that context. But the other thing is around predictive analytics. So using patient records to try to give a more holistic or personalised perspective on pharmacological treatment, and it's around this idea of clinical decision support software, which leads to a very common term that is in healthcare at the moment, which is personalised medicine. But again, not a huge amount of this, so I think it's probably one of the quiet burners at the moment. Maybe just sort of a watch this space.
Awesome, thank you. We had another question which has come through live, and it was around, do we know if there's any AI implementations for type 1 diabetes? So Daniel posed that question. He's interested to know and share with his wife if there are. So not quite sure, maybe Olivia or Graham, if you're aware of any AI implementations for type 1 diabetes.
I'm not aware of application like that. I know my former colleagues at Saro work on a project for gestational diabetes, but I don't know any project on type 1, but I'm sure that it's probably relevant.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, neither do I. I'm sure there's some sort of discussion around looking at the data sets and historical trends over time, but nothing yet from a user perspective that I'm aware of. Not saying there isn't, but nothing that I'm aware of.
Excellent, thank you. We've got a question I might pose to you, Kirsten. It came in from Tony, and it is, how are AI models and outputs, say in cancer screening, reviewed by suitably trained staff? This is potentially difficult for the profession to identify a problem.
Sure. So RANZCA advocates for human-in-the-loop AI use, which is saying that there should be a trained clinician overseeing the AI output. So if we look at cancer screening, for an example, within BreastScreen, each scan has a double read, which is currently 2 trained humans. But, I'm aware of a pilot or clinical trial in place, which would replace one of those humans with an AI. So there still would be human oversight there and checking the outputs. And I think that's, fundamentally what our position is. At this stage, there needs to be an appropriately trained clinician overseeing the outputs of AI. And that would go beyond, the screening into other areas as well. I've actually seen some models where the clinician gets a choice in what they see or what the AI outputs are. So you can see the output alone or the output with recommendations or what the AI has seen. But ultimately, it does come down to the trained doctor to make an assessment on AI outputs.
Thank you. Well, Kirsten, that kind of was another one of the questions which had come through from registration. And it does seem to come up a lot, but the question from Mohammed was, will AI replace humans?
So, that sparks a lot of debate, that question. And I think within radiology particularly, there was a statement made by one of the pioneers of AI back in 2016, essentially saying, stop training radiologists right now. AI will outperform them in 5 years. Clearly that didn't happen. AI can be really powerful in improving, efficiency and accuracy, but I really don't see us right now being at a point where it can replace the clinical judgment and training. I do think we will see routine tasks, especially automated, and we will see, not just in medicine, but broadly, roles need to evolve. But I think, the key here is to adaptation. For better or for worse, we're in our 4th or 5th industrial revolution at the moment. People who learn to collaborate with AI and work in partnership almost are going to see gains in their productivity. And I think those who really resist it risk being left behind. And unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, that's where we are at the moment. So AI is not going to replace humans, but to remain, competitive and best in your field, you will likely need to learn to use it.
Excellent. Definitely a great answer there. I have to say, I think we've run out of time, but really just quickly, I thought I'd give you all just an opportunity maybe to, a final comment that you'd like to leave with the audience or a key takeaway from today. So I will just go around the screen. And maybe, Graham, if I start with yourself.
Okay. Look, I think the simple answer is that AI is here. It's coming faster and faster every day, and I think we have to get on that train and accept the fact that it is here, and build our literacy so that we can be a part of the conversation and not be run over by the very, very fast moving AI train.
Thank you, and Olivia.
Yes, I second Graham, and I would just like to thank the very great question today, and that was a very enjoyable discussion. Thank you.
I'm glad. And Kirsten, I know you answered a really good that question before. Oh well, could have been your final comment, but if you wanted anything else to add.
I mean, I think like Graham said, it's not going anywhere. AI, it's here, and it's just going to keep growing. We're in potentially really exciting times, but it's important to get things right at this early stage because it's really hard to dial things back once poor practice or, bad use of AI is out there and embedded.
Excellent. Good point. And Paige, final comment.
I guess just reiterating what the other panel members have said, I think AI is, as Graham said, AI is here to stay, and we will look back on this in 10 or 15 years as another technical revolution that we've understood and we've tackled. I don't think AI is going to replace humans. I think AI, we need to look at it as an opportunity to utilise, and it is important that our clinicians remain trained. So yes, there are some routine tasks that may be replaced, but having watched various keynote sessions and invited sessions on this kind of thing and how AI is affecting people's professional life, I think it's a tool that we can utilise to our betterment, but I do think we should understand it, and that's really what the message is. Not blindly accept it, not blindly accept that it's given an output that's just perfect. Ask useful questions and intelligent questions, just like you would, I don't know, if you buy a car. Just make sure that it's doing the thing you think it should do. And I think our job is to make sure that those in technical roles who are implementing these new technologies know the questions to ask. So yeah, we need to take a little bit of ownership of that. But I think it's an exciting future for us all. And also, thank you everyone for questions.
Look, thank you to our audience for sure, and big thank you for you, our panel today. So if you could all just join me in thanking Paige, Graham, Olivia and Kirsten for their time and input. I would of course like to thank Engineers Australia's industry partner QUT for their support with the webinar today. Now, as always, we would appreciate if you could take a moment to please complete the short feedback form, which is found in the description box below. Your input, it really does help us to improve and plan our future sessions for you. So finally, thank you again for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at our next Industry Partners event. Good afternoon.